A very good evening to all of you. I cordially welcome you all to the second plenary session of the conference. The title of the plenary session is Green Industrial Transformation in BRICS Countries. We will now proceed with the session. It is my honor to invite the Honorable Chair of the session, Professor R.K.B. Okube, to grace the dais. Please, sir. I now invite all our distinguished panelists onto the stage. I invite our first panelist, Professor Nagesh Kumar, to grace the dais. It is an honor to invite our second panelist, Professor Imran Velodia, to join the stage. I request our third panelist, Professor Jose Papem Oliveira, to kindly join the dais. I now invite our fourth panelist, Dr. Maxensius Sri Sambodo, to grace the dais. It is an honor to invite our last panelist, Professor Joe Beal, to join the fourth panelists on the stage. I now take this opportunity to welcome the Honorable Chair and all our esteemed distinguished panelists to this plenary session. With these words, I now hand over the session proceedings to the Honorable Chair of this plenary session, Professor Okube. Thank you, sir.
First, allow me to thank Ioni Wider and Professor Kunal and the entire team for preparing this important conference in New Delhi. And I must also thank the co-host, ICID, and our brother, Professor Nagesh. It's a privilege to be in New Delhi. So we have a challenge now. This is afternoon, maybe the last session, and we will do our best to make the session as good as what my good friend Deepak Nair has been able to lead in the morning. And the session we are going to have is quite exciting and central to structural transformation. It's basically on green industrial transformation in the BRICS. I like the green industrial transformation. It's not like, environmental sustainability or climate change. And this is core to green growth, core to structural transformation. And then BRICS as a representation of the global south. We have to live with the term global south. It's just as good as like Western powers and all the terms we use. But it's really a substantial terminology which we have to use to represent developing countries and emerging economies. Yeah, so let me first introduce again our distinguished panelists. Professor Nagesh Kumar is the director of the Institute for Studies in Industrial Development, which is over 40 years old institute. I also would like to introduce Professor Imran Valodia, the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Southern Center for Inequality Studies at Wits University from South Africa. So he's here representing our continent. Then Professor Joe Biel, and a very well distinguished emeritus professor and distinguished policy fellow at LSE Cities and LSE, and also an anti-apartheid fighter in South Africa, very distinguished, I think, recognition. Professor Jose Papim Oliveira, he is from Gotillo Vargas Foundation and also at University of Manchester. And Professor Maxensius Sri Sambodo is Principal Researcher, National Research and Innovation Agency. If you want to add something about yourself, you are always welcomed. So to frame this discussion, I want to highlight 4 important issues. The first one is with the BRICS. What is this BRICS? What is this animal? And BRICS for the first time without S was in year 2001. And 2009, BRIC was founded without South Africa. 2011, it became BRICS. And now by 2025, we have 16 members of the expanded BRICS, including Egypt and Ethiopia from Africa, and also Indonesia from Asia. And I must highlight one important thing why we need to talk about BRICS. BRICS is critical from climate change perspective for several reasons. First, the BRICS countries account for 50% of the annual growth to global GDP. Half is generated by BRICS, and particularly those who are in Asia. This is an important factor. And then we have to understand also they are the global industrial power as well. They have significant manufacturing capacity. Then when we come to greening, we see a dual nature. Many of the BRICS countries are also major fossil fuel producers, including Iran or Saudi Arabia or UAE and many more. So if we look at coal production and coal consumption, BRICS consume 75% of global coal production. And we also see a second element, an emerging element, which is they are now becoming the drivers of green transformation, not in their respective economies, but also globally. And China plays quite extraordinary contribution in this process. So they are having a dual characteristics in terms of greening. Then we have to remember the BRICS, we cannot see it as a homogeneous body. The strategies they are adapting is quite different, and we also see unevenness in this process. The second framing we have to put is that up to now, the industrial capitalism since mid-18th century has been defined until end of 20th century that industrialization and global growth has been associated with fossil fuel. This has been the main paradigm. But we also need to consider a new emerging trend. It has now become quite clear it's unsustainable to proceed with fossil fuel powered industrialization, and the limits are quite clear. We see climate collapse, and pollution is a good example in cities, energy insecurity, and finite resources, and not being able to supply all the resources needed for industrialization, and this has required a new carbon neutral feature. An additional element we need to be reminded, the political economy side, is that the fossil fuel industry is being powered and is highly subsidized sector. We can say about $1 trillion subsidy goes directly to fossil fuel industries, and about 6 trillion indirectly to fossil fuel industry. And in year 2022, because of the Ukraine war, the subsidy, the direct subsidy, was 1.7 trillion. And also it earns super profits. This is a major political economy aspect. Then we have to link a very new positive force is also emerging on the technological side, renewable energy, electric vehicles, batteries. In many sectors, we are observing the technology being developed, particularly after year 2000 and especially since 2015. And this is a very positive force in green transformation. And we also observe the reality weak global collaboration. I must stop here on the framing, and I'm going to pose questions to our distinguished panels. The issues we'll be looking at are, one is, what are the new opportunities to green growth and green industrial policies, especially for the BRICS? We'll also be posing a question, what are the new opportunities for South-South cooperation? We'll also see how can the risks of increasing market competition be managed? and also the implications of green transformation in terms of urbanization and urban transition in BRICS. We will also be, the discussion will be fleshed with more examples and perspectives from India, from Indonesia, South Africa, and much broader African continent, Latin America, and also metropolitan and urban centers. We'll be having 2 rounds, and in the first round, 3 to 4 minutes to each panelist to comment on the current state of energy transition to net zero carbon emission, on the implications of industrial policy, and the picture of the current challenges and opportunities. They will be given 3 to 4 minutes. On the second round, the panelists will be able to present specific experiences, solutions, and policy issues linked with the regional experiment and lessons. And this afternoon, we want to be fair to the participants. We want to allocate significant time for Q&A, as you didn't get my time in the morning. So we will try, we'll not have a third round. We'll only have 2 rounds, then Q&A. Finally, we'll be concluding. So I would invite, I'll start with Professor Nagesh on the first issue.
This is on. Thank you, Chair. I think it's a very important discussion. Actually, the theme of the conference is about green industrialization. And the panel, actually, 4 of us are part of a book project which Kunal is leading with Imran and myself on green industrialization, covering 4 BRICS countries and some thematic chapters. But of course, we are not presenting fully what we are doing in the book project, and there's more geared to the questions the chair raised. Now, to share some of the issues and challenges and opportunities in India's case, I must also say that there is a very interesting book authored by Mr. Ajay Shankar, whom you heard last evening. It's on India's green energy transition, and it's available outside. He has been very generous to bring extra copies for anyone who wants to pick a copy and become an expert of India's clean energy transition. So, so with that, let me say that this is, an age of net zero commitments, as they say. Although there is a great heterogeneity in terms of how much of emission a country has actually contributed to. RKB alluded to BRICS countries becoming accounting for a very large proportion of emissions, global emissions. However, in per capita terms, we are among the lowest. India is among the lowest emitters of. Yet, under UNFCCC, the Paris Agreement, India has taken the net zero commitment of 2070, which might seem distant. However, there is a very ambitious sub-goal or sub-target by 2030. India has committed to achieve more than 50% of electricity requirement or electricity capacity coming from renewable sources by 2030. Reduce the emission intensity of the economy by 45%, and renewable installed capacity to increase from 40 gigawatts in 2015 to 500 gigawatts by 2030. So in just 15 years, going from 40 to 500, more than 10 times. So the government, to implement these goals, ambitious goals by 2030, has also tabled a long-term plan for low-carbon development strategy into 2022. And This covers clean energy transition, how we will achieve that, decarbonization of the transport sector, decarbonization of hard-to-abate sectors like steel, aluminum, fertilizer, cement, etc., and enhancing the corporate sustainability. But we must also recognize that, I mean, if you think that this, net zero has been imposed and we are doing, but I think there is something in it for India to benefit from. There are co-benefits of clean energy transition, for instance, besides job creation, reducing import dependence, on hydrocarbons. We are currently struggling with very high prices, the hydrocarbon or crude oil prices going through the roof, and we see how vulnerable Indian economy becomes when there is a volatility in hydrocarbon markets. So if we become more dependent on solar and other renewable sources of energy, less on hydrocarbons, it's good for the economy, brings down the volatility and vulnerability, and curbing the pollution. The Delhi and all major cities of India during the period of November to January face the very high extreme level of pollution, which can come down if we bring down the use of hydrocarbons. So to implement this, long-term plan that government adopted in 2022, a number of things have been done, and covering solar, wind, green hydrogen, biofuels, small hydro, and recently on nuclear, there's a new bill which has been adopted to allow private sector developing nuclear power. So far it was a monopoly of the public sector, and so small modular nuclear plants can be set up by private sector, and geothermal as well. So renewable energy capacity has done a very impressive job from 2015 to 2025. It has more than quadrupled from 40 gigawatts to 220 gigawatts. And we crossed this 50%, barrier. So ahead of the target of 2030. So 5 years ahead of time, we achieved that. Now we still have a lot of distance to travel to go to 500 gigawatts by 2030. Now this ambitious plan has been backed by industrial policy to foster production, deployment of renewable energy, and production of the equipment which goes to produce renewable energy, and including solar PV cells, wind turbines, green hydrogen, electrolyzers production, and all that. We have also been working on energy efficiency of appliances. So there is a program which gives this star rating to companies that produce the appliances. There is a policy for decarbonization of the transport sector and incentivizing the use and production of EVs, for instance, or the batteries that go in these electric vehicles. And then there is a policy for green transformation of hard-to-abate sectors like iron and steel, aluminum, fertilizer, petroleum refining, and cement. There is also emphasis on recycling and circular economy, but also very importantly, the private sector or the companies, which run most of the industries, are being nudged to adopt or incorporate sustainability in their business practices through what is called as business responsibility and sustainability reporting guidelines enforced through Securities and Exchange Board of India. So I think a very comprehensive agenda has been evolved over time. But because the discussion is in the context of BRICS, India is also supporting other countries, other developing countries or members of the Global South, through this International Solar Alliance, which was set up or established by India along with the government of France in 2015 at the Paris summit. And this is helping other developing countries in their clean energy transition through technical assistance. I'll stop here. I think my 4 minutes are up.
Thank you. And next, Professor Imran.
Yeah, so I I'd like to take an approach from Africa, and I want to try to quickly make the suggestion that I think for much of Africa, this kind of green industrialization kind of issue is a huge opportunity that may or may not come to something, depending on policies that are pursued by countries in Africa. So, I think we can break this space into 4 kind of global blocks of countries that I think are dealing with the issue in a slightly different way. I think firstly you have the US, which is clearly running away from its responsibilities, and as far as this kind of the Trump administration's concern with the green industrialization question, I think it sort of basically boils down to kind of abandoning an industrial strategy and really being focused only on kind of access and control of strategic resources that are important kind of exclusively for the US. I think the second block is we might think of as countries in Europe that I think have made some quite substantial advances in kind of reconfiguring their kind of energy and getting ahead on this on this green industrialization path, but I think are kind of increasingly now distracted by their own security issues. So those 2 blocks, I think, are kind of abandoning the space, and I think it's a fantastic opportunity for the developing world to really take up that space. The third block's really China, and I think it's kind of really important to acknowledge that I think what China has done, both in terms of its industrialization, but more recently in terms of its green industrialization, is truly something that hasn't ever happened before, and I think the scale and the pace and the kind of the advances that China has made in the last 20 years is truly something out of the ordinary. So that's block 3. The fourth block then is the developing countries, and I think here, if we're thinking about BRICS, then clearly some sort of partnership with China around around an industrial upgrading path in much of Africa really seems to me to be an attractive option. I think the fact that it's one part of the world where you where supply of energy is still a problem, the fact that you can leapfrog into these new technologies, I think is a really exciting exciting prospect. But I think coming back to the BRICS issue, as much as China's the big a partnership with a partnership with China's the big opportunity, it is also the big question mark. Because the pace at which China has done it, its dominance in these green technologies, its ability to do it with subsidies, I think really throws up some really important questions about how countries in Africa can find their place within this. So I'll stop there with my introductory remarks.
Thank you, Professor Imran. Next, Professor Joe Beal.
Thank you, Akebe. I'm going to be slightly provocative in what I say, in part because I don't work on green industrial transition, but I do work on cities. And for many of the BRICS, a lot of this green industrial transition is going to happen in cities. And I want to make 3 points. The first relates to cities and development and where we've come from. And to state the obvious, cities are central to life on our planet. Urban areas generate more than 75% of GDP, and they're home to the majority of the world's population. And even in, thank you, and even in middle-income countries, this includes slum populations of over 800 million. Despite this, they've been historically neglected by development studies, and this wasn't always the case. In the mid-20th century, when in the early development decades, cities were symbols of modernization. But what happened was development failures led to a shift to rural development and industrial policy located in midair, if you like, rather than in space. And they went off the agenda. Now, over time, things changed. Urban economists highlighted the benefits of agglomeration and saw cities offering economies of scale in terms of productive enterprise and public investment. Social and other sciences saw cities as social melting pots and drivers of innovation and social change, but also highlighted costs and negative externalities, if you like, within cities, marked by social differentiation, conflict, and so on. So to round off that point, what we've reached now is cities as a primary battleground for the green transition, because they generate approximately 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions and consume 2/3 of the world's energy. Now, the second point I want to make is, over this time, how cities have been treated intellectually have changed. Traditionally, within development studies, cities have been treated as a territorial form, as sites in which things happen, bounded spaces in which economic, social, and political processes are concentrated in ways that either foster or impede, for example, growth or human development or human risk. What's happened more recently, I think, is the contribution of disciplines like geography and study areas like environmental studies and urban studies. We have a view of cities not merely as sites of narrowly defined development problems or interventions, but as vectors themselves of broader development processes. And these can be positive for cities themselves, and in turn can contribute to global transformation and green transitions or otherwise. My third and last point is to turn to the BRICS and the green transition. I think the time is opportune to recognize that cities are materially consequential to the ways in which development processes, such as the green transition, play out. A lot of the problems of economic development in the past was because no one paid attention to the role that cities played in impeding economic advancement or being places that were livable and where people wanted to engage and live and bring up children. So if the green transition involves a shift from environmentally harmful practices to sustainable ones, then BRICS Plus countries offer impressive policy and evidence of progress in sustainable urbanization, smart city technology, and climate resilience-focused growth. And we've seen shining examples such as Shenzhen, you know, a city created 30 years ago out of a few fishing villages, and now, you know, at the cutting edge of AI-driven monitoring of air quality, electric vehicles, and so on. But amid all that impressive and technology-driven development, I think the danger is that BRICS cities could be like the symbolic cities of high modernization in the 1950s and 60s without the economic and social depth. I think what will mitigate against that is the new members coming into BRICS Plus, bringing in more varied and nuanced development models, and later on I'll talk about Ethiopia, as well as issues of a just transition in contexts where cities continue to face rapid and often unplanned expansion. Now I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Joe. And next, Professor Josie.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to talk a little bit about Brazil because it's a very different challenge, and when I was involved in this project, it was difficult to actually fit in the project because the challenge for Brazil is a little bit different from the other countries. The first point is that in terms of energy, for example, G20, Brazil is by far the country with more renewable energy, more than around 50%. The second is Canada, less than 20%. I mean, Brazil, in terms of renewable energy, is like much ahead, most of the BRICS. Part of this is because of policy, you know, intentionality, and part of it is the context. So you didn't have fossil fuels. You still don't have much coal. And oil start producing in large scale in 1970s. And it developed a lot in our energy assets in terms of hydro. And later on biofuels, where Brazil, for example, use more ethanol in our cars than gasoline, for example. And then we have developed strong industry in this aspect. And the second point is that Brazil is a large producer of biological resource, and particularly agriculture. Is the second largest exporter, the first in many of products, but it is the second. And thanks to Trump, maybe this year will be the first exporter of agriculture product. We passed the US. And then these, one side is good in terms of economy, but on the other side, a lot of this agriculture create problems in terms of particularly climate change. It means like when you look at Brazil, different from other countries, we have more than 2/3 of our emissions come from, while worldwide 90% of emissions come from energy, fossil fuels related, and only 10% from land use change. In Brazil, and a few other countries, the opposite. Brazil is two-thirds land use change, basically agriculture and deforestation, and only less than one-third that are actually related to energy. And it means the challenge for Brazil in terms of transformation is still a lot of room for energy transition. But on the other side, our big challenge is what we call the bioeconomy, transform our biological natural resources into economic assets to give incentives to people to not convert the land into other kinds of use, from forests. A lot of emissions, they change from forests to soybeans, or forests to really low productivity production, for example, cattle and so on. And I think our big challenge is how you transform these biological resources in something that bring economic and social development. And other aspects of Brazil is particularly, except for the previous government, Brazil has been one of the biggest promoter of green transformation. We host all these big meetings that shape, like the UNFCCC and CBD, the biological, was signed in Brazil, Rio 92, Rio +20. And we organize, like our president organized all these big meetings. We had BRICS last year, G20 year before, UNFCCC last year. I mean, we promote a lot of these meetings, and these has some benefits in terms of visibility, but also in terms of BRICS, particularly shaping the global landscape of, I would say, in the environmental governance. For example, the UNFCCC meeting, the COP last year, Brazil pushed for this the fund for forests that is the T3F, the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, has already 5 billion from different countries. Also, the coalition to harmonize the carbon matrix that actually could bring a lot of benefits and investments into the country. Our president was just in India, I think, last month, and signed also in the critical minerals an agreement. It means Brazil is involved in a lot of shaping. I think there is an opportunity for the BRICS to, and I think, fill this gap that the OECD, US are leaving. And I think it's needed on one side because of the weight, as many highlight here, the weight of the economies and the political power they have and the population. But on the other hand, what are actually the next steps still unclear, but there are a lot of rooms for help in the governance of those resources in the future. Okay.
Thank you so much. Professor Maxensius.
It's my great honor to be here, and thank you for this opportunity. And putting the context for the green industrial transformations under the BRICS, I think for Indonesia perspective, I think we already have quite solid collaboration among the countries. I will elaborate that later. But if we see from the context of pursuing net zero emissions in 2060, and also the way we are really depend on extractive-led developments, is not easy, right? For country like Indonesia, we really depend on the commodities. The export of our commodities around 55% of the commodity to the total export. So that bring a bit risk with regard to the pushing manufacturing sector, actually, due to that disease and others political economy issue. So the challenge here is since the ASEAN financial crisis, we're still struggling with pursuing economic growth, and the 5 level is the current level is around 5% is not enough. And then, yeah, as a blazing countries, we have a lot of deposit of minerals. And if we see in many mineral producing regions, actually they can grow for about double digits, more than 20%, 60% economic growth at the province levels. That's fantastic, of course. And however, the concern is that's bring imbalance in the regions because one specific mineral resources grow very fast and the rest is not much. And then another issues is also quite significant is about the supply of energy. Right? There is a mismatch because mineral is really location specific and it's quite difficult to provide energy. And the locations for the processing actually usually quite far, yeah, from the site itself for some commodities, yeah. And it is not easy to provide energy in the fast way. Yeah. As a result, we feel the industrialization will depend on fossil base. In this context, is coal. So this is kind of contradictions among the ambition to get net zero emissions and the way we are doing industrialization. So we like trapped in the middles. On the other hand, we also consider that pursuing renewable energies is also quite challenging, especially it will related to the forest, to the communities. There's a lot of social and environmental issue also depends on that energy, renewable energy expansion. So I think under this situation, actually, it is not easy to solve the problems, especially if there is a lack of vision to do industrializations, where we are going to do, what the resource we need, and how we do that. And of course, for the extractive lead development, like for example Indonesia, we depend a lot on countries that have the technology. In this case, you already noticed that China is kind of the major players to do processing on the critical minerals. But our ambition, actually, we are going to have kind of the hub, yeah, for electric vehicles in the regions, yeah, to do that. And in that context, I think Indonesia can, of course, work together with China and other countries such as Korea, how we can set up kind of value chain of the battery industry in these matters. But of course, Indonesia cannot also stay alone. Indonesia also need kind of value chain, what we call connections, yeah, with other African countries, because some component also need to be mixed, yeah, with others countries. So looking at that challenge, actually, we are struggling with developing the infrastructures, actually, how to meet the demand and the supply of energy can be properly designed without having more impact on cost, yeah, for the cost itself. And I think now we try to promote, because for the doing downstreaming activity, processing critical mineral, we need a lot of energy. So the way to do that is to provide hydropowers there. So that's why we have a set up clusters in the north of Kalimantan for providing hydropowers. But of course, there's also another issue that maybe we can solve with other countries, because Malaysia also have a big hydropower there, and then how we can collaborate. So basically, the way to do transition is cannot do alone. We need to do collaboration with a clear roadmap, with a clear target, and then how we can promote our best competitiveness from each country. I think that's my. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think they have been able to present, to give us a bigger picture. And while describing and analyzing the bigger pictures, they have been able to give us also some highlights on country-specific progress and constraints. I would like to highlight that accelerated structural transformation and the move to carbon neutral have to be combined. But there is also an inherent tension. What is best for accelerated industrialization may not be best for carbon neutral future. And this is an inherent tension the BRICS countries would have to cope with. So I would, and also a major green transformation would require a political ambition. Without bold political ambition, even the achievement that has been secured, let's say, in India or Brazil or China would not have been achieved. So it will be good to understand the challenges in terms of political commitment and bold political ambition. We have also to see production only is not going to generate, to lead us to transformation. A lot needs to be done on innovation. It's because of the innovation in China, not just the last 10 years, but for almost 3 decades, that we have seen a breakthrough in solar energy, in wind energy, in battery technology. And we see some industries at crossroad, especially automotive industry. If we see in ICE, internal combustible engine, the West or OECD countries dominate 90%. In EVs, it's mainly China dominating 60%. So we are looking industries moving in different directions. So it will be good to know what the BRICS countries are doing in terms of innovation and also in terms of building industrial production, industrial chain that help us for green transition. Then there is a big part of application, what is has been produced in solar or wind. Wide application is going to be critical for many countries, including African countries. So it will be good to hear this, but we also need to understand from what they have been able to explain, it's a very heterogeneous structure of economic structure, and their paths have been quite different. If we look at Brazil, for instance, Brazil has been doing superb in biofuel production and innovation, in developing microbes in fertilizer. They have been investing heavily in hydropower. India has primarily focused on solar expansion. So it will be good for the audience to hear what are the unique approaches each country followed, what are the challenges. This is a very difficult process, this transition. It's full of tensions. What are the major challenges in terms of political economy and in terms of industrial capacity? And I think this will be quite helpful. So one of the panelists may start and then we can go around. I would only remind you only have maximum 3 minutes, and I ask an apology if I'm going to remind you your time is up. I'm using Deepak's stick now. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think it was very nice to listen to all my colleagues on the panel and to you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to just make 2 brief points about industrial policy in conventional sense and for green industrialization, how it would be different and why it should be. First of all, I think in this room, I hardly need to explain why industrial policy is at all required. There are market failures which have been recognized very well. And so state intervention has been justified, a lot of literature on that. And all developed countries of the day and the emerging economies, newly industrialized economies, and developing countries have been using at industrial policy in some form or the other. And there is a very interesting book, I'm sure many of you have read, this Ha-Joon Chang's Kicking Away the Ladder, which shows how industrialized countries of the world, who became later on champions of free markets, and he started preaching everybody virtues of markets, were using industrial policy in a very strong and aggressive manner when they were developing. Now, green industrialization suffers from even stronger or bigger market failures than normal industrialization does. Why? Because of these environmental aspects and other externalities that I was earlier talking about, the co-benefits. And the scholars like Alice Amsden and Danny Roderick have written extensively that green industrial transformation or green industrial policies, the case for that is even stronger than industrial policy in general. And so it is no accident that most of the advanced economies of the world are pursuing industrial policy and giving it a name of a color of green. So for instance, European Union has this new Green Deal and a battery alliance, European Battery Alliance, which is all industrial policy. And before Mr. Trump, the Biden administration had this IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and this CHIPS and Science Act and all. So there were a lot of subsidies to be given to new green industries under these acts. The other point I want to make is that how the new green industrial policy is different from the conventional policies. Conventional industrial policies were generally directed at supply side interventions, that you create capacities by helping the producers or potential producers in incentivizing them to produce more and all, create capacities, and then market will absorb. For green industries, you need more than just supply side intervention, but also the demand side intervention. So for instance, giving the example of LED lights, when they 10, 15 years ago, when government was trying to push LED lights to bring down the energy consumption, there were no takers of those lights because they were 7, 8, or 10 times more expensive than conventional lights. So what did government do? They started subsidizing the procuring big quantities of LEDs, subsidize them and sell at an affordable price, which picked up the consumption, and then the scales were big enough to bring down the prices, and then subsidies were not needed. Now you buy in the market an LED tube, which is cheaper than the normal tube. So, so markets have to be built through demand side interventions. And the same goes for all other aspects of green industrialization. So solar energy, for instance, government, when it started, the solar energy deployment started, the per unit cost of solar energy was 18 to 20 rupees, and much higher than the thermal, power, the coal-based thermal power in India. So government started this program of long-term purchase agreements, so inviting the bids, who will produce it for the cheapest price, and then we buy it, we commit to buy for 20 years, and then there were bids, and so over time the bids prices have come down so much that the solar energy is more competitive than thermal energy. So this way the market was built. But then supply side interventions also were there. I just spent 30 seconds. So they helped to build the capacity to produce these solar panels, and by now, this year actually, India will become self-sufficient in production of solar panels. So this was done through normal standard industrial policy tools like production-linked incentives, which give some incentive to those who will produce these equipment in India. And so same goes for EVs, their batteries, and all other equipment. So since Chairman has hinted to me, my time is up, so I stop here. Thank you.
I had to be flexible because Professor Nagesh is the host, co-host, so we can't be impolite to our host. Any one of you can continue in the order you'd like. I also would like to remind you to touch on the issue of South-to-South cooperation. How can we create a win-win situation that the advantages in innovation, in industrial capacity, in application can be mutually beneficial to members, and way that BRICS members can avoid unnecessary market competition, and also how the positive spillover can be generated. So this is also a point you would like to probably comment. Again, you only have 3 minutes.
Okay, so I'll make a few remarks here about about the South African experience. So you heard the experience of Brazil. Think about South Africa as the kind of opposite of Brazil. So South Africa's quite an outlier. We're the 16th highest emitter in the world, largely because of an industrialization process that is heavily based on coal. I think the key part of the transition in South Africa has been the shift from kind of energy exclusively from coal to quite a substantial renewables program, and a few thoughts on the rollout of that program, which might be relevant for the conversation here. The first is that as Joe said, the kind of South African experience throws up a huge spatial conundrum. So kind of our coal-based kind of deposits and the associated industrialization is all on the eastern part of the country. The renewable potential is exclusively on the western side of the country. So this kind of question about how you deal with the spatial kind of elements of it, I think are really important, and the South African experience is interesting from that perspective. I think secondly, being a country so heavily invested in coal, and one with high levels of unemployment, kind of ex ante, I think the importance of kind of thinking about the relationship between industrial policy and kind of social policies are really, really important. I think our experience makes quite clear that you have kind of groups of workers that lose from this transition, and you have employment kind of growing in new areas, and how you deal with this question about about displacement and churning is something that I think industrial policy discussions don't think about enough. The final interesting point about the South African experience is kind of, I think, one about process. So it's kind of really interesting that we had an institution that was set up under the leadership of the president, that brought all of the different sections of our kind of society come together under the leadership of the president thresh out a plan for how South Africa would make this transition. I think the final 2 points is we have a fantastic plan, but I think there's serious issues about kind of the ability to implement. And I think for many of the developing countries, this is something that we really need to confront. And then the final point prompted by the chair's question, I think the South African example also makes quite clear that that planning for kind of planning for regional kind of integration, South-South collaboration really has to be part of the strategy kind of ex ante. Otherwise, I think kind of our experience shows that that has been really something on the side rather than part of the design.
Thank you, Imran. Yeah, please.
So I'm going to talk about Ethiopia, where I was co-PI on a study looking at the rollout of Sub-Saharan Africa's first urban light rail transit system in Addis Ababa and sanitation provision to the state-led condominium housing projects targeting low to middle-income households on the periphery of the city. I think that Ethiopia is a particularly instructive case because it brings what I was talking about in the first round, which is the experience of the new BRIC accession countries who have a more nuanced and varied approach, perhaps, and bring the instructive element that you need to remember some of the priorities that characterize old forms of development alongside the green agenda and green industrial transition issues, i.e. making cities livable for everyone in them. In response to the growth challenges that Ethiopia faces, which is one of the fastest urbanization rates in the world, let alone the continent, Ethiopia has the highest rate of infrastructure expenditure on the African continent, and in terms of South-South relations, much of this is funded by China. It's also dealing with politically sensitive governance arrangements around sophisticated technology and the coordination of multiple stakeholders. Now, I'm not going to talk about the light rail transit system. I'm going to talk about sanitation because that's where I've spent most of my life in development, looking at waste, solid waste, and sanitation issues. And it's neglected, and yet if cities are going to be livable, it's absolutely essential. And what's so interesting about the Ethiopian case is they have positively adopted a post-network city model. In other words, they haven't tried to integrate everything into a pre-existing networked sewage system. They have gone with bulk sewage in the center, septic tanks further out, and on the vast periphery around the city where these big condominiums are being built, they have institutionalized and deployed membrane bioreactor technology to provide on-site treatment. Now, it sounds very technical and boring, but the interesting thing is that this has been seen as a virtue, not second best, but something that is green, that is providing high-quality sanitation for people who are lower income, not holding up housing development because the infrastructure wasn't able to keep pace. And the third interesting thing is that this is state-led. So when you most often when you look at splintering urbanism or the post-network city, you're looking at informal settlements, you know, and latrines for the poor at one end of the extreme, or high elite enclaves that have opted out of the state system and are providing their own urban services. This is adopting the reality of a post-networked city by the state for the poor. So I think it's a very interesting lesson. The second interesting lesson coming from it is that although it's high-tech, involving imported engineers from Portugal which developed the technology that they adopted, and for good reasons, it wasn't north-south domination, it was the right technology for Ethiopia. It involved people on the ground, and they engaged with that technology in their own ways. And what we did is we traced the infrastructure interfaces where the flush toilet of the household met the manhole of the condominium, met the MBR plant, met the city governance. And what we found was at those interfaces you could identify the problems. And a lot of the problems were they were used to using welfare to work people to fix the manholes, but they didn't understand the technology of the MBR. It was assumed that the householders would be owner-occupied with an invested interest in the condominium, but often they became renters, sometimes unfamiliar with flush toilets and so on. And the city had, the private company ran the MBR with the city just in and out. I say all this not to say it was a bad idea. It was a very good idea, and I think it will succeed. What was fascinating was the willingness of both the Water and Sanitation Authority of Addis Ababa and the city to learn from these projects. So the lessons, in addition to the fact that the state can lead on these network things, is that hybridity exists with informal economy and casual workers involved in a system alongside imported professionals running the plant, and a city with high ambitions to be modern. And I say it as a positive because if you recognize it and work with it, and you have your high technology, your economic development goals, your industrialization goals, and grounded urban research showing where those interfaces and interconnections are, you can have a success story. And I think one of the things about BRICS taking on this green transition and adopting not only a city as a place where development and industrial growth, green industrial growth can happen, but can adopt a planetary disposition and an open-minded interdisciplinary approach, then you're getting win-wins.
Thank you, Joe. I may be unfair, but I think if the remaining panelists can make it 2 minutes each, that will be wonderful so that we give a Q&A. And if you forget anything, I can give you a chance, finally.
Okay, thank you. I think I would like to elaborate on the state-led industrializations. It seems that with the current context that in Indonesia, we just set up a year ago, we call Danantara. Danantara is kind of holding for the state-owned enterprises. So I think it seems that for some project related to energy to waste, and then also such gasification, they will be led by the SOEs, so it's kind of state-led approach. Yeah. So I think that is good because this is really need a lot of political support in doing coordination with provincials, government level, and so on. So I think state at the state level, there's a lot of a lot of way to make the projects done. However, the challenge with the state lead is the ambition between the market fix and the market safe. So actually, the worried if state move too much, that can have effect on the private sectors. So they can crowding out the private sectors, and of course, the intention is how to do kind of collaboration, the health collaboration with the private sector. There will be the challenge. And then another things with the state lead is the context of political economy regarding the oligarchy that also part of the system that will affect the direction of change itself. So I think yeah, there will be a lot of issue can be solved, but there is also some risk with the state lead way. And then maybe one of the one of the issue related to South cooperation also is quite clear. For example, yeah, thanks to India, to China, and others country and Russia. Regarding one of the red mud from the bauxite, so actually they can be processed for cement manufacture and so on. So I think one of the Indian company already signed a MOU with the government to buy that red mud and for the cement. So I think there's also another side effect how the BRIC country can come in helping to solve such environmental consequences from this transition. I think that's good. And then another issue also with related to the state lead is the capacity of fiscal is also need to be rational, especially in Indonesia. We have another term for energy support. I think this much larger than subsidy. That is compensations. Compensation is because government cannot adjust the price because kind of political economy issue. So subsidy mostly goes for the poor usually, but energy compensation goes to the everybody. So that's much larger than the subsidy itself. So actually, the challenge for the state lead is state need to be clear to do reallocations of the resource. So with that kind of capability, we can have more resource to do fast transition. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. No, certainly there are a lot of opportunities, as you mentioned, for particularly energy and agro. We have kind of the innovation capability that was actually built with state intervention before. This is in the working paper. It's coming out to you and you wider. But also we have the base, the natural base. You have biodiversity. You have critical minerals and land. The issue is that put in a larger context of industrialization, Brazil has been industrializing for a while, like what 35% of GDP now is, this year will be maybe less than 10. And I mean, Justin just shared one of his article about this. I found very interesting because exactly match also the things we discussed yesterday. The productivity gap actually in Latin America and I think Africa, someone commented yesterday, is actually the gap is widening, while in Asia is India and China is reducing. And also we have issues in our innovation system. We invest not much in research, and when you invest badly, you don't connect much with the market, with the development. And at the same time, our education system, you always like in the bottom of PISA, even though we have very good even field medals in Brazil, but you don't have a good education system on the base. And these can limit, but I see a lot of opportunities that you could use it and how is more the system. If you really change the scope of our regulatory system and give incentives, you could have that. It's very interesting. Brazil, you don't have a car industry, but you have very strong airplane industry. You are in like discussing the eVTO, like the flying cars. Already, and then that is something they already in the prototype, and hope that we'll be leading companies in this area in the future. At the same time, don't have carbon, large buses. You produce a lot of buses. You have a large into the word Marco Polo. It's very interesting. Marco Polo visit China. They have 5 factories in China, the largest producer of buses in China. And they produce electric buses. But when you go into Brazil, they don't produce electric buses. I mean, they produce more electric buses in China because China has the whole industry and suppliers and also incentives, but not in Brazil. And then kind of thing. And finally, I think also a big challenge related to cities is my area of research as well. And the problem is you see a lot of the industrialized, urbanizing country now, India and Africa, a lot of opportunities to catch up in this, change the development path that they have in the West, in the high emissions. But Brazil is already urbanized since 1980s, and then change city is difficult. Once you build the city, is already there for 50 years, and then how we actually retrofit our cities is much more costly, and then that may be a big challenge for us. No? But you see a lot of opportunities still in this area, particularly the areas that we already have strong innovation capability. Some of them you see spillover. For example, you mentioned about hydropower. Some of the large companies in hydropower, they also now producing wind turbines and even exporting. It means there are all of these spillover that could help. But still, if you haven't changed your innovation system, your regulatory system, to give incentives to the industries, but competitive industry, and unfortunately, I think you haven't learned much from the failures of import substitution in the 70s. You are replicating a lot of these, and unfortunately, you kind of the time is key, like now, but you actually waste a lot of time with things that you know that don't work and didn't work in the past. You try to replicate that. That is the challenge. Change the mind of those who make the policies. No.
Thank you so much. And now, with permission from Kunal, I will allow 3 questions maybe. And a reminder is this is an opportunity to ask and listen to perspective from panelists and try to focus very brief on the questions. Of course, Deepak, we can't.
Growth are both desirable. I think the question I have for the panelists, how feasible is it? I think a reality check is needed in this quest. 3 points. First, we must remember that renewable energy cannot be stored. It is fed into the grid, and therefore it does not always meet peak demands or needs. 2, what are we going to do about the energy guzzling industries that are the foundations of development? Steel, cement, aluminium, particularly in low-income countries. Yeah? And what are we going to do about air transportation and sea transportation and road transportation? Yeah? Third, I think this sense of EVs being salvation is grossly overdone. Firstly, we are producing EVs which are being charged by coal, thermal power. What are we saving? 2, lithium is an inexhaustible resource, very unevenly distributed in the world, and not accessible. 3, lithium waste is as difficult as nuclear waste to get rid of. So I think this reality check is needed. And one last point, look at the contemporary world, all right? India meets 88% of its petroleum demand, gas demand, through imports. China meets 73% of its demand for imports. Both China and India have made considerable progress in renewables, yet to sustain levels of consumption and production, they are hugely dependent on fossil fuels. Now, the cooperation that will take place in the BRICS, I don't want to be cynical. Russia is a member. Its source of economic prosperity is its fossil fuels. China and India are both going to need the fuel if the Strait of Hormuz stays blocked. So the market will mediate. They will both buy Russian oil, but that's driven by markets. That's not driven by cooperation. Yeah? And surely Russia will charge market prices for it. So I think all I'm saying is, please think it through. It's very easy to talk about green industrialization, green growth, but what are green consumption? The poorest people in the poorest countries, to sustain minimum levels of consumption, disturb the environment. Yeah? Now, preaching to them, to me, is, I remember this Bertolt Brecht line, those who've eaten their fill speak to the hungry of the wonderful times to come. So, I just want to introduce this reality check into this. There are limits to the process, and it can be very regressive if pushed too far.
Yeah, thank you. So I will see Professor Niles as a contribution. He highlighted additional reminders we need to consider. And also, this transition is of immense, full of immense challenge that requires political solution, that requires technological solution. For instance, Professor Nayan indicated the difficulty, the technological breakthrough has not been reached in terms of hard to abate industries like cement, steel, including aviation. And he also highlighted the political challenges as well. So I consider it as a very relevant contribution, and I don't think the panelists need to address to these points. So let's go to 3 quick questions in 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Sir, in future we are going to have AI and technology in high speed. For that we need a huge amount of water and electricity, which is a big issue for our green revolution. Second, about Professor Imran has pointed out EV vehicle. For that we need a huge amount of energy, and earlier in 18th century it was a big lobby of EV vehicle which was sabotaged by oil lobby. In future also, this is the way President Trump is trying to oil-based industry dollar. So how we are going to counter this type of issue?
Thank you so much. Another question, 30 seconds. Okay, let's give a chance to Professor Nagesh to be brief, 1 minute.
I think Professor Nair raised very important question, and I just try to address a couple of them. So other than solar, all other renewable sources, geothermal, wind, green hydrogen, they are not dependent upon daylights. So they are 24/7. Only solar is, that it is only in the day. So if you want to make use of solar energy in night, you need some storage. And the battery storage technologies are now becoming more and more viable. So over time, it will become 24/7. Secondly, the energy guzzling industries. This is something which is a challenge for all countries, but there are new technologies coming up which are like, for instance, Tata Steel England plant, that blast furnace, which was there for last 70, 80 years. This is British Steel actually, which Tata took over. So government of England has given 500 million pounds to Tata Steel to close the old plant, set up a new electric furnace which is green, which produces green steel. So there are those kind of innovations happening, and they will require, of course, a lot of resources, but it is possible. Air transport, sea transport, and road, of course, air will be the last, but sea transport, nuclear powered ships are all there, and road is gradually happening. There is this target of 30 EV 30 by 30. So by 2030, we hope to have 30% of penetration of electric vehicles. So it might happen. About lithium, just this is the last point. I think there are a lot of technologies coming up. So sodium ion technologies, sodium ion batteries will eventually replace lithium ion, and sodium is, salt is plentiful. So I think innovation is the key of all the questions that you have raised, which are very valid. But I think a lot of new startups and innovators are working on this. So I think 10 years will be very critical, next 10 years, where a lot of this will come up. Yeah. Sorry.
Jose, just 1 minute maximum.
Yeah, 1 minute. Just the points, I think the big challenge, actually, a lot of discussion on electricity, but decarbonization electricity only like 25%. All the rest, you see around all carbon here. I'm sitting in a fossil fuel. These are the big challenge, because those technologies are not fully available and it's still very expensive. We need a lot of R&D, and that is, and the other challenge is exactly the transitions, just transition, not replicate, not only because the green growth will be different from the brown growth in terms of inequalities, other problems that created, and how actually change the way you grew, not only change the green, but other changes you need to do in order to not replicate and create more inequalities, no?
Thank you very much. I would be wrapping now with, I have asked permission of the panelists, and we can now conclude. I would like first to thank the panelists for sharing their perspectives and being specific as well. And also Professor Nair contributed quite positively. I want to highlight a few things. What we understand from the BRICS example is the situation in all BRIC member countries, and if we link it with Global South, are all different. There cannot be one path every country can follow. This is a key point we need to be reminded. The endowment potential of renewable energy is quite different from country to country. The economic structure is different, and their experience in industrial policy also is different. The political economy is different. I want to bring you one example from my home country. I'm from Ethiopia, and Joe presented some aspects about Ethiopia. What I want to share is Ethiopia does not use solar energy at all, zero. It uses wind energy, quite significant, but over 90% is hydropower. But the investment in energy has been quite huge, and it was primarily mobilized from domestic resources. The biggest dams are built in Ethiopia, not just the recent 5,000 megawatt Grand Renaissance, but also other power projects. So, and power is available and is affordable. It's 3 to 4 US cents per kilowatt hour. You have to make it affordable if you want manufacturing sector to grow. So this gives us a lesson, a low-income country with a trajectory prioritizing energy and green energy, and hydropower is not intermittent. It's basically stable, although there are seasonal aspects. And practical applications include all industrial parks being developed are low-carbon industrial parks and using this hydropower as sources. Railway systems are electric-powered being developed. So this tells us, and also in terms of EV, the fastest growing EV within the limited market is in Ethiopia. people are buying EV because Ethiopia is a petroleum importing country, and petroleum is expensive, and they can charge from their homes because there is adequate power and they pay only 3 to 4 cents. So the main reason is not because of the political instruments, but the green energy has been an enabling element, and the macroeconomy has also become a positive pressure people to buy EVs. So what this tells us is that within our context, the big issue we have to see is, are our governments taking bold political measures is a critical issue. For countries like Brazil or South Africa, where there is significant industrial infrastructure, I think these countries have to be measured not by how they are coping with industrial capacity, but with what they are doing, including India, in innovation sphere. Year 2000, South Africa and China were the same in terms of industrial level. Actually, South Africa's industrial capacity was much more complex and sophisticated. And that was a starting point. And still South Africa continues highly dependent on coal, which has really penalized, and power generation has not expanded. So we need to invest in innovation. And BRICS should play important role in this respect so that other global south countries who cannot invest significantly in innovation can benefit. The other aspect we are understanding is now it's becoming green growth, structural transformation, and carbon neutrality are inseparable, and it's like becoming a latecomer advantage for BRICS and global south. The legacy economies are fossil fuel based in advanced economies, but we have immense market opportunity. So this is a second point I think we need to consider. A third point is the South-South cooperation is a critical aspect. To my understanding, what I know from the China-Africa Cooperation Forum is China, for instance, allowed any African country to benefit in technological know-how without any restriction in the green and digital aspect. And the BRICS should be able to combine, because what Brazil is doing is not being done, let's say, in India or China. And from Jose's example, Marco Polo is one of the major bus manufacturers globally. It's selling electric buses in China, but not in Brazil market, where it's home base. So there is huge element for sharing in terms of innovation, in terms of industrial capacity, and here a critical component is attracting foreign investment from these countries to the global south countries, which will enable them to internalize and introduce greening across industries. Yeah, so I think we have benefited from distinguished panelists on this topic, and I thank Yeni Wider for organizing this timely agenda. I will finally try to remind you, we have been working on this green transformation for some years. One of the latest projects we completed was the Oxford Handbook on the Greening of Economic Development, which was released in June a few months back. It's one of the major references on green transformation contributed from all regions, including India, US, or Japan, and it will be a good source for you to refer on, and I encourage you to look at this resource. Thank you so much. Kunal, do you have any note to make? Yeah, here you are. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to say thanks so much to the panelists for a wonderful discussion, to Arkebe, Jose, Imran, Nagesh, Joe, and Max. And also, this is the end of day 2 of the conference. Day 3 starts a little bit earlier. I'm sorry to say this, but 9:30 in the morning, we start again. And so we all need to be here by 9:15. So have a good evening, all of you, and see you tomorrow morning.
Before we close the session, I request all guests on the dais to kindly step forward for a group photo.